Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to offer a concluding lecture on the play The Tempest by Shakespeare. You'll recall that in our interactive lessons, we discussed the nature of the marriage plot as a convention of Shakespearean or Elizabethan theater, whereby the various different tensions and apparently irreconcilable elements of the play were brought into unity and that were essentially resolved. Here, however, the marriage plot fails to actually reconcile everything. It fails to resolve all of the various different conflicts and issues that have arisen throughout the play. In this play, however, the marriage does not induce reconciliation between the characters. Instead, Prospero continues to address Antonio as his adversary. He is unable to disburden himself fully of all the negative emotions that he has, and Antonio and Sebastian remain recalcitrant, unwilling to embrace the redemption and the opportunity for forgiveness that is extended to them. After all, as Prospero says in Act 5, Scene 1, line 130 to 134, "For you, most wicked sir, whom to call brother would even infect my mouth, I do forgive thy rankest fault, all of them, and require my dukedom of thee, which perforce I know thou must restore." So as we discussed here, that anger is still with Prospero. He still loathes this man. He doesn't actually embrace him or refer to him as a brother. He says, if I were to call you brother would infect my mouth. I forgive you, but even as he says, I forgive you, here he demands his dukedom back and reminds him that at any moment Prospero has, like the sword of Damocles hanging over his brother's neck, the ability to destroy him. I could reveal your plot in the conspiracy against Alonso and destroy you. I know you must restore my dukedom to me because I have this power over you. He expresses in one breath both forgiveness and a deeply rooted hatred that he, despite his assertions otherwise, has not been able to neutralize fully. What we have then is an uncertainty of redemption. As in the court mask in Act 4, there is no certain return to order in this play. Prospero's, or the limitations of Prospero's power that we saw made manifest in that moment in Act 4 are again here revealed to us. The counter voices in the play remain alive. They're not exercised by the appearance of Prospero or the king, even though they don't triumph over them. So that restoration of order over chaos, the reimposition over it by Prospero regaining his dukedom and the reintroduction of a royal figure into the play does not resolve all these issues, nor does the marriage plot. For all of Prospero's power, the order that he seeks to restore is not complete, as he acknowledges that his former enemies are not under his control. Like the playwright, he can influence people to good through the power of his art, but the actual power of to change is theirs and theirs alone in the end. The forces of evil cannot be thoroughly accommodated by the end of the play and may not even be subjugated. Antonio's silence in the final moments is surely a Shakespearean caveat to the final harmony of the play. Marriage, which is supposed to resolve issues according to the conventions of Elizabethan theater, does not. Antonio has sworn fealty to Alonso in exchange for his assistance in the usurpation of Prospero's dukedom. Thus, Milan remains a subsidiary to Naples. Prospero regains his dukedom and liberates Naples, but when he dies, Miranda's husband Ferdinand is going to become king of Naples and rule both Prospero's land and his own. Thus, Prospero has only executed a temporary restoration of his authority before he dies. Alonso is repentant, but Alonso merely helped the true criminal, Antonio. Prospero's brother, in his silence, seems unrepentant. Shakespeare is revealing to us that, well, marriage, anything conventional, anything stock, is insufficient to actually resolve the interweaved complexities of the conflicts in the real world. There is, even in this final moment, a mix of harshness and tenderness, of sweetness and sour, the myriad expressions of life that cannot be so easily resolved, and perhaps can never be resolved, as we struggle and strive, even to our ends, to attempt to overcome that animalistic impulse within ourselves that threatens to destroy everything. Not all the power of all the playwrights in the world can actually finally overcome that. Marriage certainly cannot. Yet Shakespeare does not lament the limitations of his own power, his inability to control people's minds and direct them to the good. The play does not end on a sad or melancholic or impotent note. Instead, we have Shakespeare and Prospero turning over the play to the audience. So in the epilogue, Prospero, recognizing that now he is a man, He is a human being. All the art has been laid aside. His charms are overthrown because the character of Prospero is stepping away from the scene and the actor is taking his place. And in this complex interweaving moment of actor, playwright behind the actor who's writing the lines, and character, all three of whom appear embodied in Prospero, or the character or the person who delivers the epilogue, Prospero says, "Now my charms are o'erthrown, and what strength I have is mine own, which is most faint. Now 'tis true I must be here confined by you or sent to Naples. Let me not, since I have my dukedom got, and pardon the deceiver, dwell in this bare island by your spell, but release me from my bands with the help of your good hands. Gentle breath of yours my sails must fill, or else my project fails, which was to please. Now I want spirits to enforce, art to enchant, and my ending is despair unless I be relieved by prayer, which pierces so that it assaults mercy itself, and frees all faults. As you from crimes would pardon be, let your indulgence set me free." And thus it is that Shakespeare, at this moment, asks his audience to let him go for the last time, to applaud him, the indulgence of their hands, the power of their good hands, the magic that is there now theirs, let him free. Prospero, in this epilogue, finds himself in a position that he has hitherto reserved for his subjects, both those who are witness to the play and those who participate in the play that he is writing. He expresses a sense of guilt. As you from crimes would pardon be, let your indulgence set me free. I need your indulgence. I need your grace to, in a sense, pardon me from my crimes. Prospero's theatrical project, initially the sign of his power, has now become his crime. In the world that Prospero has created for himself, crimes were only committed by others. He disburdened himself of all the dark impulses and the failings that he had evidenced throughout the work by placing them on Antonio, Caliban, Sebastian, Trinculo, Ferdinand, a series of proxies for his guilt. His final confession of guilt mirrors the general reversal of his situation. They will write the ending to Prospero's narrative, determine if the character will be released from his imprisonment on the island or remain there confined. He says, "The power is now yours, I no longer have it." The changeable protean power of Prospero's metatheatricality, the blending and mixing of real world and play, is invested in them. It is their grace, the grace of a community that Prospero entreats in his final moments, that has the potential to forgive him, redeem him, and release him. Yet Prospero in this final moment is not just Prospero, as we discussed. His aim, he says, was to please, but that was never Prospero's objective. It was Shakespeare's aim. I've mentioned in the past that Prospero is a kind of playwright, composing the narrative of this Tempest alongside Shakespeare himself. Nowhere is the connection between the two more powerful, more puissant, more clear than in the epilogue. The point that eases the audience out of the fictional world. This being, in the epilogue, who we view as Prospero, is in fact at once Prospero the actor and Shakespeare himself, speaking to his audience for the final time. As the last man left on stage, seemingly the sole inhabitant of the island, he is alone. The community that he sought to rejoin has abandoned him. Everyone else has stepped off stage. Everyone else is part of a company, a community. The other characters have someone, the lovers, the courtiers, the clowns, the fools. Everyone is part of a group. But Prospero is essentially isolated. And the Duke Magician pronounces his epilogue in a request to be welcomed back into the community of human beings by being embraced by us. Like Shakespeare himself, who sets aside the magical powers of Prospero, the magical powers of his art, in order to become just an everyday, average, regular man, no different from the members of his audience. So at this moment, Prospero appeals to the audience, to us, for mercy and also for their collaboration. He appeals to them to allow him back into a community of normal human beings. Prospero shucked his magical power, his robes, to equalize himself with his fellows, Alonso, Antonio, and the rest, because a man alone is not a man at all. He seeks for community. Here, he and Shakespeare alike equalizes himself with us. Indeed, he subjects himself to us. The master of the play, the playwright, is now the pauper, and his power is now ours. As he did with the king, Prospero now does with us. And it is the task of the audience, he says, to finish the story of the Tempest. We now have power over the story. And that is what Prospero and what Shakespeare invests in his audience. Neither Prospero nor Shakespeare can control our minds or make us change. Though this is Prospero's constant frustration, Shakespeare does not quail at this fact or lament it. Rather, he takes the recognition of it as an opportunity to celebrate, for one last time, our individual and collective abilities to determine the meaning and success of his enterprise, to remind us of our power as human beings capable of grace, mercy, and change for the better. With his charms o'erthrown, as he says in line 319, and the inevitability of his fast encroaching death ever on his mind, Prospero, or the actor through Prospero, turns over the play to the audience for their approval and for their applause, just as Prospero, the character, turned over the story of his life to his fellows in a new community. The audience will determine his tale's success, its impact, and they are now masters over the actor Prospero Shakespeare hybrid that appears in this conclusion. It is their indulgence, the indulgence of a community into which Prospero and Shakespeare entrust their stories and their lives, the thing that will set them free and determine the end of their narratives. It is in their hands and ours whether Prospero, not the actor who should be the speaker of this epilogue, but the character, will dwell in this bare island by their spell. The magic is now ours. Prospero and Shakespeare have given it to us. And Prospero does reveal himself to be Shakespeare here. The playwright takes the chance to speak through the character. As the actor turns over the play to the audience for their applause and their validation, revealing that his and Shakespeare's project was to please, dispelling the dream on the stage, so too does Prospero turn over the story to his family, recognizing that his death awaits him in Milan. Without his power, he is mortal. If the success of the actor depends on his audience, so too does Prospero's success depend on his. The actor's hopes lie with the Tempest's effective power. He relies on the meaning of the narrative which the audience constructs and feels. Final arbitration, final determination of the play's meaning, the meaning of Prospero's narrative, become the audience's domain, just as Prospero himself turns over his life to those within the world of the play and to us. Prospero becomes, well, our character, the character that we now view and interpret and reimagine through the centuries time and time again. It is the audience's spell which holds Prospero and the actor. Only conjoined mercy and magic may set him free. Through the epilogue, Prospero, his now more than ever at this moment also Shakespeare, is able to, as Stephen Orgel puts it, invest in his magic power in the audience. The spells are now ours. We have become the enabling factor in his fiction. We are the thing that makes his fiction, makes the magic of his fiction and his art possible. As Prospero's art is explicitly both mystical, theatrical, and linguistic, the conjurer's final words turn over to the audience the power of creation, orchestration, and definition. The play ends in ambiguity. The resolution to its moral conflicts remains uncertain. Yet it is given over to the audience, to us, who have become a part of the stories. We are playwrights and authors. Bound up together in the epilogue are the end of theater, the end of life, and the transference of authorial power to an audience. We determine how the story ends. We determine the effective meaning of Prospero's play, while writing the conclusion to his existence as both a theatrical construct, a character, and as a man, Shakespeare himself. His plea opens up to us our potential for grace and mercy, while investing in us his protean power. Recall what Augustine said of plays, what we began with in Act 1, Scene 2. He said that plays can inspire grief with their pitiable displays, but not mercy. They cannot inspire us to action. Again, Shakespeare rejects this answer. He uses this, his final moment on the stage, to affirm our value, our capacity, and our individual and communal power. It is our indulgence, the remission of punishment for sins, our, to him, divinely given grace, and our mercy that can set him free. He, Prospero and Shakespeare at once, the same being, lays aside his power, breaks his pen or his staff, and gives everything that he was and is and ever will be to us. He invests in us and in posterity the power to control, define, interpret, and determine the success of his works, all of his plays, everything that he was, everything he leaves behind in a public community and public recollection, now that he is stepping off the stage. Shakespeare's protean art, his power, and his ability to transform is now ours, to do with as we please. So as we look at all these characters, everything they are, it is up to us to determine, well, what they are and what they will be. In a sense, The Tempest is the perfect play for adaptation. Because every time that an actor steps on stage, every time a director creates a new film, every time you read The Tempest, you bring new life to these characters and interpret them, reimagine them. You take up Prospero and Shakespeare's closing invitation to take my works and do with them as you like, transform them, reimagine them, take control of them, use the power, the magic of my art, and make them something new, make them alive again. And that is exactly what we'll be doing as we look at these different adaptations that we'll be studying, different playwrights and authors and directors taking up Prospero and Shakespeare's closing invitation. The magic, the power is now yours. Use it in my plays. Reimagine them, reconsider them. Use them to transform them, but also to transform yourselves. And that's what we'll be looking at as we go on to these film adaptations.